She almost walked past him. Hidden beneath the snow was a tiny white wolf pup, so weak he could barely breathe. His body was covered in ice. His heartbeat was fading. The young woman had almost no food left for herself. Saving him could mean starving before winter ended, but she picked him up anyway. She wrapped him inside her torn blanket. She shared the last piece of food she owned. She believed she had rescued nothing more than a helpless animal abandoned by the wilderness. She was completely wrong. That tiny wolf was not ordinary. Hype was the last surviving heir to the most powerful alpha king alive. The only royal blood left after an entire kingdom was wiped out in one brutal night. While he slept safely beside her fire, every alpha lord across the frozen north was hunting for him. Kingdoms were sending warriors into the mountains. Ancient wolf packs were following a scent they thought had vanished forever. The lonely woman who had been rejected by her own people had unknowingly become the protector of the most valuable life in the wolf world, and the moment his enemies discovered where he was hiding, they would burn everything to the ground just to take him back. The frozen north had never known silence like this before. The wind usually carried the proud howls of thousands of wolves across the endless mountains. Tonight it carried only smoke. Great stone towers that had stood for centuries collapsed into rivers of fire. The royal banners of the White Moon dynasty burned until nothing remained except drifting ashes that disappeared into the dark sky. Warriors who had once terrified entire kingdoms now lay motionless upon the frozen ground. Their sacrifice had not been enough. The strongest alpha kingdom in history had fallen before dawn, and every creature who witnessed that terrible night believed the royal bloodline had ended forever, hidden beneath the ruins. Of that broken empire, a single heartbeat refused to surrender. Wrapped inside thick white fur was a newborn wolf pup so small that he could barely open his bright blue eyes. He did not understand the screams that echoed through the mountains. He did not know why the scent of his family was fading from the cold air. He only felt the warmth of strong paws carrying him through the darkness as loyal guardians gave everything they had left to protect the last hope of their kingdom. One after another, those guardians disappeared behind him. Their final stands bought only moments. Yet those moments were enough for destiny to escape into the endless snow. By sunrise, nothing remained except a trail that the blizzard quickly erased. The tiny wolf wandered alone across a world that had already declared him dead. His paws sank into snow deeper than his own body. Every breath became weaker than the last. Hunger burned through him with a pain he could not understand. The freezing wind wrapped around his fragile body until even standing became impossible. At last he collapsed beneath the roots of a fallen pine tree, where thick snow slowly covered his white fur. He closed his eyes as though the mountain itself had decided to hide its greatest secret forever. Far beyond the battlefield, another struggle continued unnoticed by the rest of the world. A young woman walked alone through the frozen forest carrying a small bundle of dry branches against her shoulder. Her clothes were old and patched so many times that almost none of the original fabric remained. The cold had turned her hands red long before the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Every step demanded strength she barely possessed. Still, she kept moving because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant never seeing another sunrise. She had once believed people protected one another. That belief died the day her own village turned its back on her. Fear had changed familiar faces into strangers. Whispers became accusations. Kindness became suspicion. One by one, the doors that had once welcomed her closed forever. She left with nothing except a worn blanket, a wooden knife, and the determination to survive without anyone's mercy. Since then, the forest had become her only home. The wolves were less cruel than people had been. As darkness settled across the valley, she searched beneath the trees for anything that might burn through the long night. The wind suddenly carried a faint sound that almost disappeared beneath the storm. She stopped walking. For a moment, she wondered if exhaustion had begun playing tricks on her mind. The cry came again, weak, fragile, almost impossible to hear. She placed the firewood upon the snow and followed the sound toward the fallen pine tree. Thick branches scratched against her arms as she pushed deeper into the frozen undergrowth. The storm grew louder. Snow covered nearly everything around her. Then she saw it. Two tiny blue eyes looked back at her through the ice. The little wolf pup barely moved. Frost covered his fur. His breathing was shallow. His body trembled so violently that it seemed every heartbeat might be his last. He did not growl. He did not run. He simply stared at her with silent exhaustion, as though he no longer had the strength to fear another living creature. She slowly knelt beside him. For several long moments, neither of them moved. She understood what surviving alone felt like. She recognized that empty look because she had seen it in her own reflection many nights before. Hunger, loneliness, quiet surrender. The same cruel world had abandoned them both, even if in different ways. Carefully, she reached forward and lifted the tiny wolf into her arms. His body weighed almost nothing. The warmth of her hands became the first comfort he had felt since losing everything. She wrapped him inside her old blanket and held him close against her chest, while the storm continued to rage around them. The last piece of dried meat she had saved for herself disappeared into his tiny mouth instead. She smiled despite her own empty stomach, because watching him swallow reminded her that not every life had to end in tragedy. Neither of them noticed the faint silver mark hidden beneath the fur on his shoulder. Neither of them saw the ancient symbol glowing for only a heartbeat before fading once more beneath his skin. High above the mountains, unseen figures stood upon a frozen cliff, watching the valley below. Their sharp eyes searched every forest, every river, and every hidden trail. One among them slowly lowered his head toward the cold wind. His expression changed as though he had sensed something impossible. A forgotten scent drifted through the storm. Weak, almost invisible, yet unmistakable, the blood of the true alpha heir had survived. Paragraph 4 men, Ho the tiny wolf remained asleep against her chest as she struggled through the endless snow. Every step felt heavier than the one before. The cold wind cut across her face like frozen blades, yet she never loosened her grip around the helpless little creature. She knew the mountain showed mercy to no one. A single mistake could become the last mistake anyone ever made. Still, she refused to leave him behind. She had been abandoned once, and she would never become the reason another. Soul was abandoned again. Her home stood at the edge of the forest where broken cliffs protected a small, wooden cabin from the worst of the winter storms. Calling it a home was generous. The roof leaned under the weight of old snow. The walls carried cracks where icy wind slipped inside every night. The fireplace was built from uneven stones gathered one by one over many lonely months. Yet to her it was enough. It was the only place in the world where no one could order her to leave. She pushed the old wooden door open and quickly placed more branches into the fireplace. After several attempts, a weak flame finally came alive. Orange light slowly filled the dark room. Warmth returned little by little. She carefully laid the tiny wolf upon a folded blanket beside the fire. His breathing remained slow and uneven. Ice melted from his white fur, and small drops of water soaked into the fabric beneath him. She searched every corner of the cabin until she found a small bowl with a little warm goat milk left from the day before. There was barely enough for one meal. She looked at the bowl for a long moment. Her own stomach cried from hunger. She had eaten almost nothing in 2 days. Even so, she carried the bowl toward the little wolf and gently touched a few drops against his mouth. For several quiet moments, nothing happened. Then his tiny nose twitched. His tongue slowly moved. Last he began drinking with weak but determined movements. A soft smile appeared across her tired face. It was the first genuine smile she had shown in many weeks. Watching life return to his fragile body somehow made her own exhaustion feel lighter. She sat beside him until he finished every last drop. Only then did she lean back against the wall and close her eyes for a brief moment. The cabin became peaceful. Outside, the storm continued without mercy. Inside, 2 lonely survivors shared the same silence. The little wolf finally opened his eyes again. They reflected the dancing fire with a strange brightness that did not belong to an ordinary animal. He watched the young woman without fear. Something deep inside him recognized safety, even though his memories had vanished with the destruction of his kingdom. He could not remember his parents. He could not remember the palace. He could not remember the warriors who had given their lives protecting him. Yet somewhere beneath those forgotten memories, his heart remembered one simple feeling: trust. Slowly, he dragged his tiny body across the blanket until he rested against her feet. The movement was so gentle that she almost laughed. She reached down and carefully stroked his soft white fur. He closed his eyes once more, as though the touch itself chased away every nightmare hiding inside his small heart. Far away beyond the frozen mountains, another fire burned. It was not the warm fire of survival, it was the fire of conquest. Inside a massive fortress built from black stone, dozens of Alpha Lords gathered around a great hall. The throne that once belonged to the White Moon dynasty now stood empty beneath towering wolf banners stained with fresh blood. Every face inside that chamber carried pride mixed with suspicion. They had won the greatest war in their history, yet none of them looked completely satisfied. One old Alpha slowly stepped toward the center of the hall. His silver eyes scanned every warrior before speaking. The prince was never found. Silence spread across the chamber. Several leaders exchanged uneasy glances. One warrior finally answered. The kingdom burned completely. No newborn could survive that night. The old Alpha lowered his head. His voice became colder. Hope has started wars before. A living heir would unite every loyal wolf left in this world. The room fell silent once again. No one argued. They all understood the danger. The White Moon bloodline had ruled for generations because its power surpassed every other Alpha family. If even one rightful heir remained alive, the balance of power could someday change again. The old Alpha slowly turned toward the commander of the royal hunters. Find him. Search every forest. Search every mountain. Search every village. If the last prince breathes, then the war is not over. The commander bowed without hesitation. Within moments, hundreds of elite hunters rode into the freezing night. Their wolves raced across the snow with terrifying speed, leaving deep tracks behind them. They carried only one mission: erase the final piece of the old kingdom forever. Back inside the lonely cabin, the fire slowly burned lower. The young woman remained asleep beside the fireplace, completely unaware that the greatest hunt in the history of the wolf kingdoms had already begun because of the tiny creature sleeping only a few feet away. As midnight settled over the forest, something extraordinary happened. The little wolf suddenly lifted his head. His bright blue eyes glowed with soft silver light. For only a single heartbeat, an ancient symbol appeared across his shoulder. Thin, streams of silver energy circled his small body before quietly disappearing into the darkness again. Outside the cabin, every wolf in the surrounding forest suddenly stopped moving. Their ears lifted toward the same direction, without understanding why each one slowly lowered its head. It was not fear. It was instinct, even hidden beneath the body of a helpless pup. The blood of the true Alpha King still commanded respect. And somewhere deep within the endless darkness, one pair of crimson eyes opened. They had finally found the direction of the lost heir. Morning arrived without warmth. A pale gray light spread across the frozen valley, while thick snow continued falling from the silent sky. The little cabin stood alone beneath towering pine trees, almost invisible beneath layers of fresh snow. It looked forgotten by the world. Perhaps that was the only reason fate had protected it until now. The young woman slowly opened her eyes as the last pieces of firewood crumbled into soft, glowing embers. The freezing air quickly reminded her that another difficult day had begun. She pulled her old blanket around her shoulders before turning toward the little wolf. He was gone. Her heart skipped for a single frightening moment. She quickly stood and searched every corner of the cabin until she noticed a small white tail disappearing behind an old wooden chair. Relief washed across her face as she knelt beside him. The tiny wolf was awake for the first time since she had rescued him. He was carefully exploring his surroundings with slow, uncertain steps. His legs still trembled from weakness, but curiosity pushed him forward stronger than fear. She smiled softly. Looks like someone finally has the strength to walk. The little wolf looked up at her voice. His glowing blue eyes held an intelligence that felt strangely unusual. He quietly walked toward her before gently resting against her leg. There was no hesitation, no fear, only quiet trust that had somehow grown overnight. She reached down and scratched behind his ears. His tiny tail moved for the very first time. The sight filled the empty cabin with life. For a few precious moments, neither of them remembered loneliness. Outside, the forest slowly awakened beneath the endless winter. Birds searched beneath frozen branches for food, while distant rivers remained trapped beneath thick sheets of ice. The young woman stepped outside, carrying an old wooden bucket. Fresh water had become difficult to find after every snowfall, and she needed enough before another storm arrived. The little wolf followed behind her. His small paws sank deeply into the untouched snow, yet he refused to stay inside. Every few steps he stumbled before standing again. His determination made her laugh quietly. "You are stubborn already." She continued toward a narrow stream hidden between two cliffs where water still flowed beneath thin ice. As she filled the bucket, she noticed something strange. The forest had become unusually quiet. No birds sang, no rabbits moved, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A strange feeling settled inside her chest. She slowly looked around the trees. Nothing, only endless white snow. She convinced herself it was simply another winter morning and began walking home. Hidden far above them, several pairs of golden eyes watched from the branches. A pack of wild wolves silently observed the woman and the tiny white pup walking through their territory. Normally, they would have attacked any stranger who entered without permission. Today, none of them moved. The oldest wolf slowly lowered his massive head. One after another, every member of the pack followed. Not because they understood why, because every instinct inside them demanded respect. The tiny white pup never noticed. He simply continued following the woman while leaving small footprints behind her larger ones. By midday, the cabin had become warm once again. The young woman repaired a broken window using old pieces of wood, while the little wolf slept beside the fireplace. Hours passed peacefully, then everything changed. A loud crash echoed from outside. She immediately froze. Another sound followed. Heavy footsteps, not animal, human. She carefully moved toward the window and looked through a narrow crack. 3 hunters stood near the edge of the clearing. Each carried long spears wrapped in thick fur clothing. Their faces were hidden beneath heavy hoods, but their movements revealed experience. They studied every footprint surrounding the cabin. The young woman quickly stepped back. Very few people ever traveled this deep into the frozen north. Strangers rarely brought good news. She quietly picked up her old wooden knife, though she knew it would offer little protection. The little wolf lifted his head. His ears stood upright. His calm expression disappeared. Something ancient stirred deep inside him. A strange feeling he could not understand spread through his small body. Danger. The hunters slowly approached the cabin. One of them stopped near the fresh footprints leading toward the door. He crouched low and touched the snow. Fresh. Someone lives here. Another hunter looked toward the surrounding forest. We search quickly, then move on. The order came without emotion. The young woman held her breath. The tiny wolf quietly walked until he stood directly in front of her. His body was still small, still weak, yet he refused to hide behind her. The sight surprised even her. She gently lifted him into her arms, hoping to keep him quiet. A heavy knock shook the wooden door. The cabin fell completely silent. Another knock came harder this time. "Whoever is inside, open the door." The voice carried authority but no kindness. She remained motionless. Her heartbeat echoed louder than the wind outside. Several long seconds passed. Finally, the footsteps began moving away. Relief slowly returned to her face. Perhaps they had decided to leave. Then, another voice spoke from outside. "Commander, there are tiny wolf tracks leading inside." The world seemed to stop. The little wolf suddenly felt warmth spreading beneath his white fur. His blue eyes slowly shimmered with faint silver light. Not enough for anyone to notice, just enough for something deep within his sleeping bloodline to awaken. Far beyond the mountains inside the dark fortress, the oldest alpha suddenly lifted his head. A cold smile appeared across his face. The heir had just revealed himself. The knock came again with enough force to shake the old wooden walls. Snow slipped from the roof and fell outside the cabin, while the young woman stood frozen beside the door. She could hear heavy boots pressing deeper into the snow. These were not travelers searching for shelter. They moved with discipline. They searched with purpose. Every instinct inside her warned that opening the door would change everything. The little white wolf remained in her arms, but something inside him had begun to change. His heartbeat grew stronger with every passing moment. A strange warmth spread through his body like a hidden fire waking beneath layers of ice. He did not understand what was happening. He only knew that the voices outside filled him with a fear that felt older than memory. His small ears flattened against his head as forgotten instincts whispered that these men carried the scent of enemies. The commander outside slowly circled the cabin while studying every mark left in the snow. His sharp eyes stopped near the doorway where tiny paw prints ended. He lowered himself toward the ground and touched one print with his gloved hand. The snow was still fresh. Whatever had entered the cabin had done so only a short time ago. His expression hardened. He rose without speaking and gave a quiet signal. The other hunters spread around the cabin. One moved toward the back wall. Another climbed onto a nearby rock to watch the windows. No escape remained. Inside the cabin, the young woman realized hiding was no longer possible. She wrapped the tiny wolf beneath her old blanket and gently placed him inside a wooden basket beside the fireplace. Dry cloth covered his white fur until nothing could be seen except darkness beneath the blanket. She looked into his glowing blue eyes. "Stay quiet, little one." Her voice was calm, even though fear tightened every breath. The wolf watched her without making a sound. For reasons he could not explain, he trusted every word she spoke. The door slowly opened. The freezing wind rushed inside first. 3 hunters stepped across the wooden floor while snow clung to their heavy boots. Their eyes searched every corner of the small cabin. They noticed the cracked walls, the empty shelves, the worn blanket hanging near the fireplace. Everything spoke of hardship. Nothing suggested danger. The commander looked directly at the young woman. "You live here alone." She nodded. "Yes." His eyes remained fixed upon her face. "Have you seen a white wolf pup?" She hesitated for only a heartbeat. "No." The answer left her lips smoothly, yet her heart pounded louder than ever before. The commander remained silent. He slowly walked around the cabin, studying every object with careful attention. His gaze finally stopped beside the fireplace where tiny drops of melted snow still darkened the wooden floor. He knelt. His fingers touched the damp wood. Fresh. His expression changed. Someone had stood there very recently. Before anyone could move, a loud howl echoed across the forest. Every hunter immediately turned toward the sound. Another howl answered. Then another. Within seconds, the entire valley seemed alive with distant wolves calling to one another beneath the gray sky. The commander frowned. This was no ordinary hunting call. Something had disturbed every pack in the region. He stepped outside to observe the forest. The young woman remained standing near the open doorway while cold wind swept through the cabin. Far beyond the clearing, dozens of wolves appeared between the trees. They did not attack. They simply watched. Large gray wolves. Black wolves. Even old scarred alphas stood together without fighting. All of them faced the same direction. The cabin. The hunters slowly raised their weapons. One whispered quietly, "Why are they only watching?" No one answered, because no one understood. Inside the basket, the tiny white wolf slowly opened his eyes. The silver mark hidden beneath his shoulder glowed brighter than ever before. Invisible waves spread silently through the forest, Every wild wolf lowered its head a little further. The ancient bloodline was calling. Not with sound, not with force, with authority. The commander suddenly felt a strange pressure settle over the clearing. It lasted only a moment before disappearing completely. He searched the surrounding forest once more, but found nothing except silent wolves standing perfectly still. Finally, he gave a sharp order. "We leave." The mission was becoming dangerous. Too many unknown things surrounded this forgotten place. The hunters slowly disappeared back into the forest until only their fading footprints remained behind. The young woman closed the door and leaned against it. Her legs trembled from relief. She released a slow breath she had been holding since the first knock. For a long time, neither she nor the little wolf moved. Then she uncovered the basket. The tiny wolf immediately climbed into her arms. She laughed softly while gently rubbing his head. "Looks like danger has passed." She believed those words. The mountain did not. High above the valley, hidden behind a wall of dark clouds, a massive black wolf stood upon the edge of an icy cliff. His crimson eyes stared toward the lonely cabin far below. Unlike the hunters, he had sensed something impossible. He had felt the awakening of royal blood. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. The prince was alive, and now he finally knew where to begin the hunt. The mountain gave them 3 quiet days before reminding them that peace never lasted forever. Fresh snow covered the hunters' footprints until it looked as though no stranger had ever walked near the lonely cabin. The young woman slowly allowed herself to breathe again. She returned to her simple routine. Every morning she gathered wood. Every afternoon she searched beneath the frozen trees for berries that had survived the winter. Every evening she repaired another broken piece of the little cabin that had become the only safe place either of them had ever known. Life remained. Difficult, but no longer felt empty because she was no longer facing it alone. The tiny white wolf changed with every sunrise. His body grew stronger far faster than any ordinary pup should. His legs no longer trembled when he walked across the snow. His bright blue eyes stayed alert to every sound hidden inside the forest. He learned every trail surrounding the cabin without getting lost. He returned before sunset every single day, as though an invisible thread always guided him back to the woman who had saved his life. She often laughed while watching him chase falling snowflakes across the clearing. For the first time in many years, genuine happiness lived inside those frozen woods. One cold afternoon, she carried a bundle of firewood toward the cabin when she noticed the little wolf standing perfectly still near the edge of the forest. He was staring into the distance with complete focus. His ears pointed toward the northern mountains. His body looked calm, yet every muscle remained ready. She followed his gaze but saw nothing except endless trees covered in white snow. She smiled softly. "Did you find another rabbit?" The little wolf never looked away. Something hidden beyond the trees had already caught his attention. Far across the valley, an enormous elk slowly pushed through the deep snow, searching for food beneath frozen bushes. It was old, but powerful. Thick antlers stretched toward the gray sky like ancient branches. The animal suddenly lifted its head. Its dark eyes scanned the silent forest. Every instinct warned that someone was watching. The little wolf quietly lowered his body. The young woman noticed the change immediately. He had never moved like that before. His breathing slowed. His eyes narrowed. The playful pup disappeared. For only a few moments, something older seemed to awaken beneath his white fur. Without warning, he sprinted forward. His speed shocked her. Small paws raced across the snow with surprising confidence. He never barked, never made a sound. He moved from tree to tree, using every shadow for cover as though invisible lessons had been buried inside his blood since birth. The elk suddenly turned. Too late. The little wolf leaped from behind a fallen tree. He was still too young, still too small. The elk escaped with one powerful jump before disappearing into the forest. The wolf landed harmlessly in the snow. He remained standing while watching his prey disappear beyond the trees. There was no frustration in his eyes. only quiet observation. He had learned something. The young woman finally caught up to him, breathing heavily from the chase. She knelt beside him and gently rubbed the snow from his fur. "You almost had him. Maybe next time." The little wolf looked at her before gently touching his nose against her hand. She smiled. Neither of them realized that no ordinary wolf pup could have tracked an elk with such patience. The ancient instincts of the White Moon dynasty were slowly returning. Not through memories, through survival. As evening approached, they walked together beside the frozen river where thin sheets of ice reflected the fading sunlight. Everything seemed peaceful until the little wolf suddenly stopped once again. This time his reaction was different. His body became tense. A low growl escaped his throat for the first time. The young woman looked around carefully. Nothing moved. Then she noticed fresh footprints pressed deeply into the snow. They were far larger than any wolf she had ever seen. Each print looked fresh. Very fresh. The tracks circled the river before disappearing toward the cliffs above. She slowly stepped backward. "Those are not yours." The little wolf lowered his head. The scent carried through the cold air. It was unfamiliar, powerful, dangerous. High above the cliffs, two crimson eyes silently watched them from behind a wall of stone. The massive black wolf never revealed himself. He simply observed. His enormous body remained hidden beneath drifting snow, while the freezing wind carried every scent toward him. The woman, the cabin, the little white wolf. There could no longer be any doubt. The royal bloodline had survived. A slow smile formed across his scarred face. He had searched for months across broken kingdoms and frozen valleys. Now destiny had walked directly beneath his eyes. He quietly turned away from the cliff. There would be no attack today. The prince was still young. Too weak. Too easy. A patient hunter never frightened prey before the trap was complete. Night slowly covered the mountains once more. Inside the small cabin, the young woman prepared another simple meal, while the little wolf rested beside the fireplace. Outside, the snow continued falling without end. Far beyond the forest, shadows began moving between the trees. Not one, not two, many. The hunt had entered its next stage, and this time they were no longer searching blindly. They were coming for the last alpha heir. The following morning arrived beneath a sky as white as the endless mountains. Thick clouds covered the sun until the entire valley looked frozen in time. The young woman stepped outside carrying an empty basket. She planned to collect herbs that grew beneath the rocky hills where the wind exposed small patches of earth. Winter had stolen almost everything else, and those hidden plants had become their only source of medicine. Before leaving, she looked toward the little white wolf resting beside the doorway. "Stay close today. Something feels different." The wolf quietly stood and walked beside her without hesitation. The forest welcomed them with complete silence. Snow covered every branch while frozen mist drifted slowly between ancient pine trees. The air felt heavier than before. Even the wind carried an unfamiliar scent. The little wolf noticed it immediately. His ears lifted toward every sound while his bright blue eyes searched places the young woman could not see. Every instinct inside him whispered the same warning. Someone was watching. They climbed higher into the hills where thick stone walls blocked the strongest winds. The young woman carefully gathered small green herbs growing between frozen rocks. She smiled with relief because enough plants remained to last another week. As she reached for one final bundle, she noticed something shining beneath the snow. It was an old silver pendant. Its surface was covered with strange symbols, almost hidden beneath years of ice. She gently brushed away the snow before lifting it into her hand. The metal felt surprisingly warm, despite the freezing air. The little wolf slowly walked closer. The moment he looked at the pendant, a sharp pain rushed through his head. His entire body froze. A distant memory flashed across his mind. A towering palace surrounded by white banners. A powerful wolf with silver eyes standing proudly upon a throne. strong warriors lowering their heads in absolute respect. The vision disappeared as quickly as it had come. The little wolf stumbled backward, breathing heavily. The young woman immediately knelt beside him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She gently held his face between her hands. The pain slowly faded. The memory vanished completely. Only confusion remained. She placed the pendant inside her pocket without realizing it had awakened the first broken fragment of his forgotten past. As they started walking home, fresh snow suddenly began falling again. Large flakes covered the valley within minutes, making every path difficult to see. The young woman pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "We should hurry. Another storm is coming." The little wolf suddenly stopped. His nose lifted into the cold wind. The scent had returned. Stronger now, much closer. He released a low, warning growl. The young woman turned quickly. The forest behind them looked empty. Then a branch snapped, another followed. Dark shapes moved silently between the trees. Not hunters. Wolves. Huge gray wolves slowly emerged from the forest one after another. Their thick winter fur blended perfectly with the snow. Their golden eyes remained fixed upon the young woman and the little white wolf. She slowly stepped backward. There were too many. The little wolf moved in front of her without thinking. His body remained small compared to the massive wolves surrounding them, yet he refused to retreat. The leader of the wild pack slowly stepped forward. His scarred face revealed years of battle. He stared directly into the tiny white wolf. Several long moments passed. No one moved. Then something impossible happened. The massive leader slowly lowered his head. Every wolf behind him did the same. Complete silence filled the valley. The young woman stared in disbelief. She had never seen wild wolves behave this way. The little wolf looked equally confused. He had done nothing, yet every creature before him acted as though standing before a king. The old leader slowly stepped aside, leaving a clear path through the forest. It was not surrender. It was respect. The little wolf walked forward cautiously. The wolves never challenged him. Instead, they remained perfectly still until he and the young woman safely passed between them. Only after they disappeared beyond the trees did the wild pack finally lift their heads again. High above the valley, hidden among towering cliffs, the enormous black wolf watched everything. His crimson eyes narrowed. The ancient packs had recognized the prince before he had recognized himself. That changed everything. The bloodline was awakening faster than expected. Waiting was no longer an option. He slowly turned toward the shadows behind him, where dozens of armored wolves stood ready. Their eyes burned with ruthless loyalty. His deep voice echoed across the frozen mountain. "The time for watching has ended. Prepare the hunt. Bring me the white moon heir alive. Kill anyone who stands beside him." Far below, the young woman and the little wolf finally reached the safety of their cabin, completely unaware that an army had already begun moving through the frozen north. The first real battle for the last alpha heir was no longer coming. It had already begun. Darkness arrived earlier than usual. Heavy clouds swallowed the last light of the sun while freezing winds roared across the mountains. The forest no longer felt alive. Every tree stood like a silent witness, waiting for something terrible to happen. Even the birds had disappeared. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Inside the small cabin, the young woman carefully placed another log into the fireplace. Warm. Light filled the room but failed to chase away the strange feeling growing inside her heart. She had survived countless winters alone. She understood the language of the mountains better than most people. Tonight, the silence did not promise peace. It warned of danger. The little white wolf rested near the doorway instead of beside the fire. His bright blue eyes never left the darkness beyond the wooden walls. Every few moments, his ears twitched toward distant sounds too quiet for human hearing. His body had become stronger over the past weeks. His shoulders looked broader. His movements carried confidence. Yet inside his heart something restless continued to awaken. The silver pendant lying upon the wooden table suddenly caught the light from the fire. The wolf looked toward it. Another sharp pulse rushed through his mind. This time, the vision lasted longer. He saw endless white towers reaching toward the sky. He saw thousands of wolves lowering their heads before a single throne carved from crystal ice. He saw himself standing beside a giant silver wolf whose eyes held both kindness and unimaginable power. The enormous alpha gently touched his forehead. A deep voice echoed through the empty palace. "One day this kingdom will become yours." The vision shattered. The little wolf gasped as though waking from a dream. His breathing became heavy. The young woman immediately noticed. She rushed beside him and gently placed her hand upon his head. "Easy, little one. You are safe." Her calm voice slowly settled his racing heart. He looked into her eyes. The palace disappeared. The throne disappeared. Only she remained. For reasons he could not explain, her face always brought peace stronger than every forgotten memory. Outside, the storm suddenly grew louder. Then came another sound. A long, haunting howl rolled across the valley. The little wolf instantly stood. Another howl answered from the eastern cliffs. Then another. Soon dozens echoed together until the mountains themselves seemed alive. The young woman quietly stepped toward the window. Nothing, only darkness. Yet every instinct inside her screamed that something waited beyond the trees. Far away beneath the cover of night, black figures moved silently through the forest. Not ordinary wolves. Not wandering hunters, elite warriors. Each one wore dark armor crafted from frozen steel. Thick cloaks hid their bodies beneath drifting snow. They spoke only through silent hand signals while surrounding the valley from every direction. The massive black wolf walked at their front. His crimson eyes never left the lonely cabin glowing faintly beneath the storm. Months of searching had finally ended. The prince had nowhere left to run. He slowly raised his head toward the sky. Every warrior immediately stopped moving. No one questioned his command. No one broke formation. They waited with perfect discipline. The black wolf closed his eyes for a brief moment before speaking. "No one harms the heir. He belongs to me." The warriors silently lowered their heads. The order had been given. Far below, the young woman suddenly heard something scrape against the cabin wall. She quickly grabbed the wooden knife hanging beside the fireplace. It offered little protection, but she refused to stand helplessly. The little wolf slowly walked in front of her. His body remained small compared to any grown wolf, yet his posture had completely changed. His head stood high. His shoulders straightened. His eyes burned with quiet determination. The frightened pup who had once hidden beneath a fallen tree no longer existed. Without understanding why, he felt only one desire: protect her. A loud crack echoed outside. One of the old fence posts surrounding the cabin snapped in half. Another followed. Heavy footsteps circled through the snow. Not rushed, patient, confident, like predators enjoying the fear of trapped prey. The young woman held her breath. The little wolf released another low growl. This one sounded deeper than before, older. For a single heartbeat, the air inside the cabin became strangely heavy. The silver mark beneath his shoulder flashed brightly. Invisible energy spread across the frozen valley. Miles away, every wild wolf suddenly lifted its head. One by one, they abandoned their dens. Gray wolves, black wolves, white wolves. Old alphas scarred by countless battles. Young hunters just entering adulthood. Without knowing why, they all began running toward the same place, toward the lonely cabin. Back inside the forest, the massive black wolf suddenly stopped walking. His crimson eyes narrowed. He had felt it, the royal aura, stronger than ever before. A slow smile crossed his scarred face. The prince was beginning to awaken, exactly as the ancient prophecy had promised. He looked toward the dark cabin one final time. Tomorrow would not be another hunt. Tomorrow would become the day the last white. Heir finally learned that the entire world had been waiting for his return. The first light of dawn never reached the valley. Thick black clouds covered the sky while freezing wind swept across the mountains with terrifying force. Snow circled through the forest like restless spirits searching for something hidden beneath the ancient trees. The little cabin stood alone against the endless white wilderness, completely unaware that hundreds of eyes had already surrounded it during the long night. Every path leading away from the valley had quietly disappeared beneath waiting shadows. Inside the cabin, the young woman awoke before sunrise. She had barely slept. Every strange sound outside had forced her eyes open again. The silence had become heavier than any storm she had ever survived. She looked toward the little white wolf, expecting to find him asleep beside the fireplace. Instead, he stood at the open window. His bright blue eyes remained fixed upon the distant forest. He had not moved all night. She slowly walked beside him and gently rested her hand across his back. His fur felt warmer than ever before, almost as though a hidden fire burned beneath his white coat. "You have been watching something all night. What do you see?" The little wolf remained silent. Far beyond the trees, dozens of faint shapes stood perfectly still between the falling snow. They were too far away for human eyes, not for his. Every movement, every heartbeat, every scent reached him with growing clarity. His senses had become sharper with every passing day. He could hear armored paws crushing frozen branches. He could smell strangers hiding beyond the wind. Most frightening of all, he could feel their hatred before ever seeing their faces. Deep inside his heart, another unfamiliar feeling slowly awakened: responsibility. He did not know why. He only knew that allowing those shadows to reach the cabin would bring disaster. The young woman quietly prepared another small meal, using the last pieces of dried meat she had stored for winter. Their supplies had become dangerously low. She smiled anyway, and divided everything into 2 equal portions, one for herself, one for the little wolf. He walked toward her and gently pushed his own food back with his nose. She laughed softly, trying to share now. "You are kinder than most people I have ever known." She broke the food again, making 2 even smaller portions. Neither of them noticed how little remained for tomorrow. Outside, the valley slowly changed. Wild deer disappeared into deeper forests. Birds abandoned their nests. Even the old wolves that usually hunted alone began gathering in silent packs across the mountains. Nature itself seemed to recognize that something ancient was approaching. High above the cliffs, the massive black wolf stood beside a circle of elite warriors. His crimson eyes calmly watched smoke rising from the lonely cabin. He showed no anger, no excitement, only absolute patience. One armored wolf stepped beside him. The valley is surrounded. No escape remains. The black wolf slowly nodded. Good. No one attacks until sunset. Fear grows stronger when people spend the day waiting. The warriors quietly disappeared once more beneath the trees. The trap had already closed. Back near the cabin, the young woman decided to collect water before another storm arrived. She carried the wooden bucket toward the frozen stream while the little wolf walked silently at her side. Every few moments he looked behind them. The feeling never left. Someone followed every step. As they reached the river, she noticed fresh ice covering nearly the entire surface. Only one narrow opening allowed clear water to flow beneath the frozen sheet. She knelt carefully beside it and filled the bucket. The little wolf suddenly lifted his head. His body became perfectly still. Across the river, another wolf stood watching. Its fur was gray with age. Its eyes carried quiet wisdom instead of violence. The old wolf slowly walked closer until only a few steps separated them. The young woman expected a growl. Instead, the old wolf lowered its head. Then it turned toward the little white wolf. For several silent moments, neither animal moved. The air itself seemed to stand still. Without warning, the old wolf gently placed something upon the snow before stepping backward. It was a single white feather. Long. Perfect. Its surface shimmered beneath the pale morning light. The old wolf looked once more toward the little prince before disappearing into the forest without making a sound. The young woman carefully picked up the feather. That was strange. The little wolf stared at it. Another distant memory touched the edge of his mind. A royal ceremony. White feathers falling from the sky. Ancient voices promising loyalty to the blood of the White Moon Kings. The vision disappeared before he could understand it. He lowered his head, confusion mixed with quiet determination. Piece by piece, his forgotten past was finding its way back. As evening approached, the sky darkened once again. Heavy snow began falling faster than before, while cold winds howled through the valley. The young woman hurried back toward the cabin, unaware that countless glowing eyes had already appeared between the distant trees. The little wolf suddenly stopped walking. He looked in every direction. They were no longer hiding. Dark figures slowly stepped from the forest one after another. Not attacking, not speaking, simply surrounding the valley. The young woman followed his gaze. Her face slowly lost all color. For the first time she understood that this was never about ordinary hunters. Something much greater had found them. Far above. The valley. The massive black wolf finally stepped from the shadows onto the highest cliff. Snow blew around his enormous body while his crimson eyes locked onto the tiny white wolf below. A deep smile crossed his face. The waiting was over. The heir of the White Moon dynasty had finally come into his sight, and before another sunrise, the forgotten prince would be forced to discover who he truly was. The valley had never looked so beautiful and so terrifying at the same time. Fresh snow covered every mountain like a sea of silver, while the rising sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds. Cold light spread across the frozen forest, revealing hundreds of silent shadows standing between the ancient trees. They no longer bothered hiding. Their hunt had reached its final stage. Every path leading away from the lonely cabin was sealed. Every escape had vanished before the day had even begun. The young woman stood outside the cabin holding the small white wolf close against her chest. Her breathing had become slow and careful. Fear still lived inside her, but it no longer controlled her. She looked toward the endless line of dark figures surrounding the valley, and quietly accepted one painful truth. Whoever these strangers were, they had not come for her. They had come for the little life she had rescued beneath the snow weeks before. She gently stroked the soft fur around his neck. "No matter what happens, I will not let anyone take you." The little wolf lifted his head and looked into her eyes. He did not understand every word, but he understood every feeling. Her heartbeat remained calm despite the danger. Her hands never trembled while holding him. She had protected him from hunger. She had protected him from freezing nights. Now she was preparing to protect him from an army. Something deep inside his heart responded to that courage. A strange warmth spread through his body. Not anger, not fear. Purpose. Far above the valley, the massive black wolf slowly descended from the highest cliff. Every step crushed the snow beneath paws larger than those of any ordinary alpha. Behind him, dozens of elite warriors followed without making a sound. Their armor reflected the pale morning light while their eyes remained locked upon the lonely cabin. They stopped only a short distance away. The black wolf calmly studied the tiny white pup standing beside the young woman. Months of searching. Months of waiting. The last prince finally stood before him. He lowered his enormous head slightly, his deep voice carried across the frozen valley. "Your blood cannot remain hidden forever." The young woman stepped forward before the little wolf could move. "Leave him alone. He has done nothing to you." The black wolf looked at her with quiet curiosity. There was no hatred in his expression, only certainty. "You saved a life that belongs to history. You simply did not know it." She tightened her grip around the little wolf. "He belongs with me." The words echoed across the valley. Every armored wolf remained perfectly still. The little white wolf slowly stepped out from behind her legs. He stood facing the massive black alpha without lowering his head. His body was still young, but his posture carried growing confidence. For the first time, he did not feel small. The black wolf smiled faintly. "There you are, the prince of the White Moon dynasty." The word struck something buried deep inside the little wolf. Another memory exploded through his mind. A royal throne glowing beneath moonlight. His mother gently wrapping her tail around him. His father standing before thousands of warriors as every wolf lowered its head in absolute loyalty. Then came fire. Screams. Blood across frozen stone, the palace collapsing beneath endless flames. The little wolf staggered backward as those forgotten memories crashed into the present. His bright blue eyes suddenly blazed with silver light. The ancient mark beneath his shoulder spread across his body like flowing moonlight. The air changed. Every wild wolf hidden throughout the valley suddenly emerged from the forest. Gray wolves, white wolves, old warriors, young hunters. Hundreds gathered upon the snowy hills without attacking. One after another, they slowly lowered their heads toward the tiny white wolf. The young woman stared in complete disbelief. The little creature she had carried through the snow now stood before an entire wilderness that recognized him as their rightful king. The black wolf quietly watched the moment unfold. His voice became softer. "The kingdom never forgot you. Neither did its enemies." The little wolf slowly turned toward the woman who had saved him. She looked at him exactly as she always had, not with fear, not with worship, only with love. That single look became stronger than every royal memory returning inside his heart. He walked back toward her. He gently pressed his head against her hand. She smiled through tears she could no longer hold back. "I do not care who you were before. You are still my family." The words settled deep inside the young prince. In that single moment, he finally understood the difference between power given by blood and strength earned through love. Far across the valley, another sound suddenly echoed through the mountains, a massive war horn, then another. The black wolf slowly lifted his head toward the northern cliffs. His calm expression disappeared for the first time. New armies were approaching, far larger than his own, far more dangerous. The old enemies of the White Moon dynasty had finally arrived. And this time, they had not come searching. They had come to finish the last Alpha King forever. The sound of the war horns rolled across the frozen north like thunder shaking the mountains awake. Snow fell harder with every passing moment until the entire valley disappeared beneath a curtain of white. From the northern ridge, thousands of armored wolves emerged in perfect formation. Black banners rose above them carrying the mark of the Shadowfang coalition. The true architects of the royal massacre had finally arrived. Their leader stepped forward beneath a cloak darker than the storm itself. His scarred face showed neither anger nor mercy, only satisfaction. He had hunted the last heir since the night the White Moon Kingdom burned. Now the child he had failed to kill stood before him at last. The valley became trapped between two armies. On one side stood the massive black wolf and his loyal warriors. On the other stood the ruthless coalition that had stolen the throne through blood and betrayal. Between them remained only the young woman and the little white wolf whose destiny had finally awakened. The wind carried silence instead of battle, because every warrior understood that one decision would shape the future of every kingdom beyond the mountains. The Shadowfang leader slowly raised his head. "Give me the prince and no one else dies." His voice echoed across the valley like falling stone. The black wolf answered without hesitation. "The throne belongs to the White Moon bloodline. I will never kneel to thieves." The two armies remained frozen while the young woman looked down at the little wolf beside her. He no longer appeared frightened. The silver mark beneath his fur shone brighter with every heartbeat. Memories continued returning like waves crashing against forgotten shores. He remembered the faces of his parents. He remembered the oath sworn by thousands of loyal warriors. He remembered the night everything was stolen from him before he had even learned to speak. Yet one memory stood above all the others. A lonely woman lifting him from beneath the snow, sharing her last food, protecting him when she had nothing. That memory became stronger than every royal crown. The little wolf slowly walked forward until he stood between both armies. His small body looked insignificant against countless battle-hardened warriors, yet no one dared move. Every eye remained fixed upon him. Every heartbeat seemed to wait for his choice. The young woman wanted to stop him, but something inside her heart whispered that this path had always been waiting for him. She remained where she stood. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. Whatever happens, you will never be alone. The little wolf turned toward her one final time. His bright blue eyes softened. Then the impossible happened. A brilliant silver light burst from his body and spread across the valley like moonlight pouring over fresh snow. The air itself trembled. Ancient energy flowed through every mountain and every frozen river. The ground beneath hundreds of wolves began glowing with old royal symbols forgotten by history. Every wild wolf dropped to one knee. Every loyal warrior lowered his head. Even the massive black wolf bowed with complete respect. The prince had accepted his blood. He had become the true Alpha King. The Shadowfang leader stepped backward for the first time in many years. Fear finally entered his eyes. He raised his voice and ordered his army forward. Attack! Before the first warrior could take another step, an earth-shaking roar exploded through the valley. It came from the young Alpha King. The sound carried no hatred, no rage, only absolute authority. The roar rolled across the mountains with unstoppable force. Every enemy wolf froze where they stood. Their legs refused to move. Their bodies trembled beneath a command older than memory itself. The royal bloodline had awakened completely. No stolen crown could stand against it. The Shadowfang warriors slowly lowered their weapons one after another. Many dropped to their knees. Others turned away from the false king they had followed for years. Loyalty built on fear shattered within moments. Loyalty born from destiny returned stronger than ever. The Shadowfang leader looked around in disbelief. His empire collapsed without a single battle. He had spent decades destroying the White Moon dynasty, only to lose everything before the rightful heir had even reached adulthood. The Black Wolf calmly stepped beside the young Alpha King. Today, the kingdom is yours again. The little king looked across the valley filled with wolves waiting for his command. He could have chosen revenge. He could have answered betrayal with endless bloodshed. Instead, he slowly walked back toward the young woman. He rested his head, gently against her hand, exactly as he had done inside the small cabin on the day she saved his life. Every wolf watching understood the lesson without a single word. True kings were not created by power alone. They were shaped by kindness shown when no one else cared. Months later, the frozen north looked alive once again. The broken castles of the White Moon Kingdom echoed with hope instead of sorrow. Loyal wolves rebuilt walls that had once fallen beneath fire. Peace slowly returned to lands that had forgotten its meaning. The young woman never asked for a throne. She never wanted riches or titles. She chose to remain exactly where her journey had begun, beside the one life she had rescued beneath the snow. Each morning, the Alpha King still walked beside her through the forest, just as he had when he was only a tiny white pup. Every warrior lowered their head as they passed, yet she still smiled at him as though nothing had changed. Far beyond the restored kingdom hidden beneath mountains, no map had ever marked an enormous pair of glowing golden eyes slowly opened inside an ancient cavern. A deep voice echoed through the darkness. The last White Moon King has returned. Prepare the forgotten kingdoms. The real war has only just begun.